good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us here tonight. Before we go ahead and proceed with the webinar, I just have a couple of quick announcements for you. My name is Pete Eberle, and I'm with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society. For those of you who are new to our events, CRES and its local chapters provide education, policy advocacy, and community engagement that accelerate Colorado towards a carbon neutral future powered by 100% renewable energy. Founded in 1996, CRES is a statewide, nonpartisan 501c3 not-for-profit that is supported by our sustaining members, donors, and our business sponsors. You can sign up for our newsletter, announcements, social media, and become a member or donor at www.cres-energy.org. Also make sure to visit our YouTube channel where we have over 230 previously recorded presentations that have now pushed over 1.4 million views. Before I get to our upcoming event announcements, quick thanks to our gigawatt and megawatt business sponsors, Solaris Energy, Moss Adams, Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, Sinton Instruments, Kelly Government Solutions, Platte River Power Authority, and Sandbox Solar. In terms of our upcoming events, on Thursday, March 21st, 7 p.m. at the Alliance Center in Denver, we will have a practical guide to going passive with Mark Attard. That will be an in-person event, but it will also be live streamed. That link will be in the event announcement. Then on March 27th, 6 p.m., a webinar up here hosted by myself here at the NCRES chapter. We'll have Building Performance Standards in Fort Collins with Catherine Bailey of Fort Collins Utilities. And then on Thursday, March 28th, 7 p.m. at the Jefferson Unitarian Church in Golden, we have the energy transition and community solar's role in tribal energy sovereignty. That event will be in person, but it will also be live streamed. You can find out registration information by going to cres-energy.org and clicking on the events tab. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass the baton to Geoff, and we can proceed. So,
well, good evening. Thank you for having me. As Peter introduced, my name is Geoff Ferrell. I am Senior Vice President of Virtual Power Plants and our project business for Sonnen Inc. And Sonnen Inc. Just to share very quickly, is the American wing of the Sonnen Group, which is based in Wilpolsried, Germany. So yeah, Sonnen was founded in 2010. We'll go into this a little bit more. We have to start with heritage before we start about what we're really here to talk about. But the goal today is to present more or less a case study style presentation around a community in Harriman, Utah, just south of Salt Lake City. It's a suburb of Salt Lake City called Soleil Lofts. It is a 600-unit all-electric community that is powered by solar, has sonnen batteries, both commercial and residential, and we'll use the webinar to go into a little bit of detail around that. So that's that. As I kind of kick into the first slide here, a little bit about myself. I have been with Sonnen for a little over 4 years, again, Senior Vice President of Virtual Power Plants in our project business, really designed to help our partners come up with implementations for renewable energy, whether that be solar, wind, hydro, or utility-based, harnessed with batteries, and most importantly, harnessed with our Sonnen VPP for the aid of energy transition, the stabilization of the energy grid in the local as well as in the global kind of context, and generally do good things in a business sustainable fashion. So that's really the goal. That was the goal of Sonnen when they were founded in 2010. As I mentioned, from day one, Sonnen was meant to be a grid-connected, grid support asset. In fact, today, in Germany, in the areas that we call the DACH region of Europe, over 98% of installations with Sonnen batteries do not do backup. They are not grid forming inverters. These batteries are not meant for backup purposes. The German grid happens to be relatively stable. Thanks a lot to the U.S. ingenuity after World War II. That grid outages are rare. Really, the purpose of solar and battery in Germany is to balance the grid, to harness the different price signals in the grid throughout the day, and then to use a battery and virtual power plants like the sonnen VPP to help consumers, end consumers, prosumers join in that monetization and those grid mechanisms. So from day one, that's who we were. Continue to be a leader in the European market for behind the meter residential battery systems. And as you see there, MIT chose us as one of the 50 smartest companies in the world back in 2016, awarded us that. We were purchased by Shell. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Shell since 2016. So one of the wings of Shell, helping to do things that are energy driven, not necessarily carbon-based fuel driven. So an interesting piece there. Couple key stats: 1,700 employees worldwide, 1,000 plus partners worldwide. The first, this isn't even really an argument, the first residential behind the meter virtual power plant on the planet. We've been operating the virtual power plant in Europe for over 9 years, in the US for 7 years. And in terms of energy storage systems that are meant for grid support, not those really cool like Outback and deep cell lead acid batteries for off-gridding and your cool cabin up in the woods and whatnot. One of the very first commercially built energy storage systems on the market, lithium iron phosphate from day one, carbon or cobalt free from day one, believed in lithium iron phosphate technology. We'll go into that in just a moment as well. And of course, including our worldwide stats, over 170,000 residential and commercial energy storage systems installed across the planet. Core markets, I started to mention this earlier. Core markets are Germany, Italy, the United States, Australia, Belgium, of all places. That's kind of a weird one, and the United Kingdom. You could also add Spain to that. Our Spanish business has taken off in the last couple of years. And a couple of kind of key milestones. In Germany, we are allowed to do some things that we're just starting to tickle here in the US that are really interesting. Hopefully, I think some of the questions will probably go this way towards the end. In Germany, sonnen actually operates as a utility. So if you own solar or don't own solar, which is an interesting side conversation, but own a sonnen battery, you can choose sonnen as your energy provider. You would sign up for a program. In this case, the one we're kind of talking about here is what we call sonnen flat, which is actually a model I've loved for a long time. You basically pay a flat subscription fee. You're paying €30 a month to be part of the sonnen community and to have a sonnen flat rate plan. You have an allocation of energy, so you can use as much energy as you want up to your allocation. It isn't metered at an energy rate. It isn't tariffed at a demand charge or anything like that. You simply do your thing. Your sonnen battery is then steered in the background by sonnen operators in Germany, in Berlin and in Wilpolsried, to do all the grid mechanism-y things: primary frequency response, energy markets, real-time day-ahead trading. And basically, we're trading energy in the background using your battery as an asset if you're a customer, giving you a subscription, a flat subscription to just live in your home and enjoy what you have and be part of a clean energy-based virtual power plant-based rate plan and community that is what we call the sonnen community. We have sonnen community here in the US as well. I'll touch on that as kind of part of our progression towards what Soleil Lofts is before we get into the meat and potatoes of that. The full sonnen VPP was launched in Germany for primary and reserve. I wrote that wrong. I apologize. Primary, reserve, and frequency response markets in 2018. That should say primary frequency response and reserve markets, which is one of the more advanced grid services that we've joined recently. Here in the US, we don't do primary frequency response yet, but we do what we call secondary frequency response with the systems, including the ones at Soleil Lofts that we will go into. Okay, some key value propositions on our journey to the case study. First and foremost, what I would say about sonnen is we are an energy company. Our product is twofold. Our product is the VPP, the sonnen VPP, which is a proprietary platform that controls primarily sonnen batteries, but most importantly, we control other people's batteries now. There are 4 batteries here in the United States that we can control with our platform via IEEE 2030.5, and another half dozen or so that are in the development pipeline right now. So we have a number of customers across the United States, as well as some stuff in California in the open market, New York, New England in the open market, where we are operating as an aggregator, and other battery manufacturers have chosen to join our aggregation for the value stack that we can provide them and provide their customers. That all started in Germany again as well. It's been around since 2016. The full VPP technically launched in 2018 when we started offering these advanced grid services. So, you know, going on 8 years full-fledged, 5-6 years, 5-6 years with the really advanced systems. And then, of course, in the US, that led to what is now known as the Rocky Mountain Power Watt Smart Battery Grid Management System. And as we talk about it more, the BGMS, Battery Grid Management System, the pilot for that program was Soleil Lofts. So when Rocky Mountain Power said, hey, we'd like to do a pilot, we'd like to partner, this community came up and they said, okay, our pilot will be 622 batteries, lots and lots of megawatts, lots and lots of megawatt hours to prove that this thing works. It's now rolled out to almost 4,000 households throughout Utah and Idaho, Rocky Mountain Power territories. We won't talk a whole lot about that. That's definitely a follow-on if anybody's interested in the larger build out of what WattSmart is today. Really will focus on Soleil Lofts as kind of a aggregated community for all the really cool things that it is. The second value proposition that kind of enables our journey in the webinar tonight is electrochemistry. So I kind of teased it a little bit earlier. Since day one, our founders believed that lithium iron phosphate was the way to go. If you're not interested in rocket ships and cars that go 0 to 60 in sub 3 seconds, you're not interested in such things as high energy density, or the fact that a lithium iron phosphate, iron being the key word there, is probably heavier. So for a stationary energy storage system, it doesn't really matter. What does your water heater weigh? Who knows? You just know that it was designed to fit where it fits and it doesn't fall through the floor, and we're all happy. So being that we are an energy storage, a residential energy storage, stationary energy storage company from day one, lithium iron phosphate made sense to us for all the right reasons. It is the longest lasting, safest, lowest toxicity, cobalt-free battery chemistry commercially available then and today. Of course, then it was extremely expensive. People thought we were bananas crazy to go lithium iron phosphate because it was so much more expensive than nickel, manganese, cobalt, or other, you know, common technologies at the time. Now, what do we see? 10 years later, you know, certain technologies that were just recently launched are launching with lithium iron phosphate, and holy crap, now it's a great idea. Imagine that. So, you know, even within the product family and the chemistry family, proud that our chemistry, our design, our patented cell technologies that are used with our vendors are, even amongst lithium iron phosphate, the longest lasting, safest, most durable batteries in the marketplace, which again, for a project like we're going to talk about, is a very important piece, because part of this is that it needs to be a sustainable business model. And when you're talking about sustainable business models, you're talking about assets in those models, whether that's solar or inverters, or in this case also batteries, that are going to last 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, have the backing of manufacturer that will back those things up. And then it's not something that you have to change out every, you know, 5, 6, 7 years like you do with, potentially have to do with some technology. So that is a core tenet of ours since day one and remains today. We are on our 5th generation of battery chemistry, or I'm sorry, battery cell and module. So that those things just keep getting better. And of course, the market's really come to us as more manufacturers have swung this way, including some car manufacturers. Lithium iron phosphate has really dropped into a much more commercial position in terms of cost per kilowatt hour with some of those other technologies. So it's all started to come our way. Our latest generation of battery is extremely cost effective and competitive with other batteries out there. Whereas if you happen to have any tangential knowledge of sonnen from years past, you would know that one of our core batteries, in fact, the battery that is featured at Soleil Lofts, carried an MSRP of like $51,000 or something stupid. It was not a mainstream battery from that respect, especially if you were looking at it for backup purposes. So looking at it from a different perspective, looking at those longer life cycle warranties and capabilities, it starts to make more sense. And now we've done a lot of value engineering. Cell pricing's come down. It's all starting to equalize, so that's really great for the industry and renewable energy adoption with battery and VPP at its core. Skip them. Okay. Last piece on this, and I promise I'll stop talking about longevity and safety. Just a quick comparison on some of the safety stuff. On the left side is a chart of different technologies. You can see some NMC here that tails off really quickly. I will also mention that some of these upper lines up here, this green, the orange, and the brown, these also happen to be other lithium iron phosphate technologies that do drop off. So not all lithium iron phosphate is created equal, whereas ours was really designed to go thousands and thousands of cycles with relatively low degradation. I think I passed this slide already, but we actually have a battery in our test lab that has exceeded 28,000 cycles and still has 65% of its original state of health. So that's obviously in a lab, but an interesting proof point around the way this technology was designed to last the long haul. And of course, on the safety side, I think one of the things that that we're all cognizant of in in stationary energy storage, that's the phrase I was going for, is safety. We want to make sure that these things that are in our garages, that are in our basements, on the sides of our homes, that back up to our sons or daughters' bedrooms perhaps, are safe, and that we don't need to worry about them. There's some demonstrations out there around how lithium iron phosphate differs when there is a malfunction at the cell level versus nickel, cobalt, aluminum, or nickel, manganese, cobalt, for example, and that is an important factor when deciding on an energy storage system for anything, but certainly if you're bolting it to the wall or putting it in your basement, or if you're going to put 622 of these in a very small, dense community, of course. The last kind of building block, if you will, this is actually building block, so I'm a man of my word. The last kind of building block before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the why and the how are to really kind of analyze what we consider the 4 levels of behind the meter energy storage applications for the United States. Certainly a lot of us are used to what we consider level 1, which is backup resiliency for energy security. The grid goes out without a battery. Most solar, certainly of the past, that's changing a little bit with some technologies. Most solar does not operate. It doesn't nanogrid. You can't consume your own solar without a grid forming inverter. A lot of the earlier batteries, certainly a lot of the off-grid situations were really meant for this: backup power resiliency and energy security in off-grid situations. Then we started to evolve into what we consider level 2, is just what we call it, a simple solar battery daily cycle and maximizing self-consumption. So that's simply the battery saying, what's going on right now? Does solar exceed load? If so, what's my battery? My battery can be charged. Oh, heck, I'm going to put the extra solar into the battery. We'll dump it in the battery. Oh, a cloud rolled over. Solar no longer exceeds consumption of the home, so I need to discharge the battery to cover consumption of the home. And it would do that. The cloud clears, goes right back to charging the battery. Battery's full, goes, hey, I've got nowhere else to go. I'm covering loads. I've got excess solar. Let's export to the grid. That's old traditional net metering. If you're on old net metering or live in a part of the country where you still have traditional 1-for-1 net metering, you're okay with that. That's great. We're still putting a kilowatt hour into the grid. The utility's compensating us for that to use it at another time, and that's great. But simple daily cycling and self-consumption is a pretty basic level of a lot of the batteries out there today. Level 3, level 4, I won't read this word for word. You guys are reading it as I'm talking. This is basically where we believe sonnen begins to really shine and differentiate ourselves as a hardware technology that can then be coupled with a virtual power plant with dynamic signals coming from a utility or coming from an ISO market like CAISO or NISO or ISO New England, things like that, where we are doing a couple of really interesting things. First and foremost is bill optimization. Clearly, if you can't create an ROI for the person that's investing in the solar and the battery, you're probably not going to get mass adoption. So that is extremely important. We want to make sure that we have precise control over that daily cycle. If we're in parts of the country where we have a time of use or a time of day rate structure, that we're tuning the battery's use to that time of use or time of day structure to absorb as much solar as possible, to maybe defer around those super off-peak times, but then absolutely positively to discharge battery fully against those peak periods where things are most expensive. I'm talking to you guys tonight from not so sunny San Diego, but it is normally quite sunny here. And what I will tell you is at 5:55 in the evening, my home right now is consuming 83.6 cents per kilowatt hour power. And no, I don't have a battery. Unfortunately, my home was built in the 60s. I don't have a panel big enough to support a battery plus solar. So I haven't figured that one out yet with the old pocketbook, but we're going to get there. I do have solar on my home, so I do bank some net metering credits, but I am unfortunately in this position where I'm consuming a very expensive power in the evenings. And as we have these time of use, time of day plans kind of sweep across the country, which is an inevitable thing, I think, as solar adoption, rightly so, continues to happen, having solutions for that phenomenon in the grid is the appropriate thing to do. We think that batteries are key to that. And then certainly a control layer that allows homeowners, businesses, or business models to offload or shift operational control of such things to someone else where they can maximize their return. So level 3 is really about that bill optimization, deploying discharge patterns, in some cases deploying charge patterns to ensure that battery is filled up in preparation for those peak periods on a daily cycle. Then you get to level 4, which is the full shooting match. This is full dynamic grid services. This is us optimizing the bill, taking in signals either from a utility operator, from an ISO market, to say, on top of these things that we would normally do, there's some finite things that are happening. There's some really surgical things that are happening. Yes, I told you I want you to discharge from 4 to 9 because that's our peak period. However, it's a really hot day in August, and what I'd really like for you to do is not just discharge against load, but I really could use some net injection. We could use some grid support, and we're willing to pay you for it. This is really the level where you need that control layer, that VPP layer that's orchestrating, coordinating the batteries, that's looking at individual batteries and Susie and Tom and Bill's homes and saying, yes, you guys are little batteries, but in terms of going to the market or demonstrating you to the utility, you are a big battery. Yes, we're in hundreds and thousands of different locations, which we'll talk about from a grid science standpoint, is actually a really good thing. But to be able to look at and steer that as a larger asset is really extremely valuable to the utility or to the ISO market in terms of optimizing that against other things like a coal-fired power plant, or a simple cycle gas peaker plant. If you could choose an aggregation of batteries really simply, 10, 15 megawatts of it over here versus firing up a simple cycle gas plant, that's a really good thing. I think we would all agree that's a really, really good thing. So that's really what we're talking about in level 4, is kind of bringing this all together. And then of course, at the base of it, you always have backup power resiliency, energy security, unless you don't want it, which is an interesting phenomenon that we can touch on in a moment as well. So why do I tee it up? Why do I spend so much time? Why did I spend 28 minutes teeing that up, talking about who we are, where we come from, and our principles? Well, because there's change ahead. I realize that the primary audience here is in Colorado. Forgive me for showing a couple of examples from California. This could very easily be Hawaii or Arizona, or perhaps even Nevada as well. But this is really where we've seen things go time and time again with the mass adoption of solar, which again is a fantastic thing. We absolutely should continue to encourage that, maybe just to evolve it a little bit so that it becomes firm, dispatchable, dependable, reliable, as opposed to erratic and non-dispatchable, and is typically discounted, quite frankly, in utilities IRPs and long-term planning documents when it's not coupled with the battery and control layers. So this is something I'm sure just about everybody on the call, if you're in the space, if you're in the industry, you've seen this before. This is the duck, or the duck curve, aptly named because you've got this big fat belly in the middle of the day where you've just got lots and lots and lots of beautiful renewable energy covering homes' loads. This is a residential curve, by the way, not commercial industrial, covering homes' loads, and then that excess pumping into the grid. Then lo and behold, in the evening, what happens? My goodness, the sun goes down. Who would have guessed it? Meanwhile, we're all coming home. We're charging our iPads, turning on our TVs, cooking dinner, finishing that load of laundry we started in the morning. And lo and behold, load shoots to a daily high while the sun is going down and it is just a terrible, terrible ramp that is very difficult for the utility, for the distribution grid to handle. And inevitably what happens, we've seen this in Europe, we've seen this in Japan, we've seen this in Australia, we certainly see this in Hawaii, California, Arizona, coming to a grid near you. All this really beautiful work that we've done with renewables has to be countered with more carbon-based peaking power plant resources. Why? Because the sun goes down and solar stops working, but we as electricity demanding, paying customers want to go in our home and flip on a light switch and expect the lights to come on. So one of the ways we combat this is again, if that solar was in theory connected to a battery and that battery was controllable, even with a very simple time of use schedule, or even more dynamically controlled by the utility, what can we do? We can basically say, we can cut off the belly of the duck and say, instead of that energy indiscriminately being pumped into the grid, which may or may not be useful, you don't know, most likely it's, in most cases it's not, in some cases it is, we can put that in the battery instead. We can hold that behind the meter and never touch the grid in the first place. It's essentially smart self-consumption. We can then dispatch that battery into the evening as solar is ramping down and loads are ramping up. We can dispatch that battery on top to balance that load, and we can both cut off the belly of the duck as well as decapitate the head of the duck. Provocative word, but in this case, I think the duck doesn't mind. That's a really good thing for the grid. So this is just an example of it. And then of course, just to demonstrate that we're not seeing dramatic changes, here in 2021, an updated curve for California, that midday saturation is getting even worse. The really interesting part about this is, if you notice the chart on the left, this is overall demand. You can actually see that in 2021, the bottom of this curve got dangerously close to zero, meaning that energy being pumped into the grid, energy resting on the grid at that moment held zero commercial value whatsoever. This is a bad, bad thing for everybody involved, generators, consumers, distribution, transmission, all of us. This is a very bad thing. California obviously has some tools to combat this. They participate in the CAISO market. They participate in the WIM, where they're selling power to neighboring states like Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah, and are able to do some balancing things around that. But this is definitely an opportunity for homes and businesses and communities to participate in the grid of the future to help us move away from carbon-based peaking resources, carbon-based intermediate generation, perhaps one day even carbon-based baseload generation, embrace more renewable energy with smart controls where the utility can signal what it is that they need. We can start to match demand to supply instead of supply to demand, which is inherently a less expensive, cleaner, and more sustainable way to go about things. So that's that. So here's where it really started in the United States. And full disclosure, this is actually where I come from. So prior to Sonnen, I was Chief Technology Officer for Mandalay Homes for 6 years. This is a home builder in northern Arizona and central Arizona, building highly sustainable, energy efficient, healthy, durable housing at market rate. So that was my entire job as CTO for Mandalay Homes, was to figure out the cool new technologies that we could bring to these homes that supported their health, their energy efficiency, their sustainability, their durability, but to do it in such a way that, you know, this home wasn't 2x the home across the street for the same 3-bed, 2-bath home. It really was about optimizing it. So in Arizona, I will also disclose that this is not a VPP yet. This is not what we would consider a VPP. We would kind of affectionately call this VPP light, but this is where it began. This is basically solar and batteries in a highly optimized home that are responding to a very specific rate structure. So the utility, in this case, Arizona Public Service, APS, had created a pilot rate structure that has evolved into a couple of really cool iterations of this rate structure today that basically said you can have really cheap power every day, every hour. We're all about it. 4.5 cents, you know, it's nice cheap power. We'd love for you to take it. During the day, during sunny hours, or during off-peak periods, This was also coupled with a demand charge. You could have up to 5 kW of demand. You're good. We can handle that. The grid's good. But from the hours of 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., what we'd like for you to do is go out to your main breaker, just turn that off. Don't consume any power whatsoever, because if you have any demand on the grid but during those peak hours, we're going to charge you a demand charge starting at 0. 0.1 kW would incur a demand charge plus your energy charges for any energy that you consumed. So what we were able to do at Mandalay Homes was optimize a solar array and a battery with sonnen, including a now patented time of use optimization algorithm that would charge the battery all day long off of solar and grid energy, which at the time was technically not allowed, but the IRS couldn't tell me no. So we kind of got away with it, and I'll tell you that I could tell you the argument over a beer, how we actually got the IRS to agree with us that we were doing the right thing. But basically what the algorithm would do is it would say, okay, my state of charge is this, homes loads are this, solar is this. Based on the conditions this moment, will I get to 100% state of charge by 2:59 p.m.? If the answer was no, it would augment with grid charge and it would optimize that grid charge. So basically we would trickle charge the battery all day long so that we got to 100% battery charge at 2:59, and then at 3 p.m. we'd flip over to discharging against load if the solar wasn't covering. Certainly as we went in the evening, that's exactly what we would do. As long as the battery performed and the solar performed and the customer didn't do crazy things like install a sauna in their garage or try to charge their 3 golf carts or add an Olympic-sized pool in the backyard. Those are all real examples. Then the system was tuned to that home's needs and to that model's needs. And consumers, Mandalay consumers under this rate plan were seeing as much as a 75% reduction in their annual utility bills, including non-bypassable charges. So essentially the only bill they were getting were those minimum connection fees on the base of the year. Meanwhile, the solar on the rooftop was only providing 65–70% of the home's annual need for electricity. The balance was actually coming from the grid, but the way that we were charging, we were harnessing nickel power, 4.75 cent power, and never using that peak power that would incur demand charges, and that resulted in extremely low bills for the customer. And the utility benefits as well, because we're doing exactly what they're asking for in terms of a load shape. We're soaking up excess solar in the grid during sunny hours. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, so I called it OPP, other people's power. We were soaking up other people's power during the day, which is what APS was actually kind of pseudo asking for, not directly, but that's what the signal was telling us. And then not consuming grid power at all during peak, which is exactly what they were looking for, a reduction in congestion and demand on the grid during those hours. So that's where it started. This was called the Ion Series Home. Again, it was in partnership with Mandalay Homes and Sonnen. At the time, I was on the Mandalay side. Now I'm on the Sonnen side. Very proud that during the time I was there, including the year after I left, the homes received 7 awards from the Department of Energy, from Sam Rashkin, DOE, and then in the last year, right after I left, from Senator Granholm on behalf of President Biden, for being the most innovative grid-connected home in the country, meaning that the home wasn't just sitting on the grid doing what it did, but it really was designed to interact with the grid, in this case to that rate plan that we just talked about, and react in a unique way that benefits energy transition, the use and optimization of renewable energy, and provide a benefit to the broader grid. So that was that. It was also the first specification in the country for solar plus battery standard on a production home. We specified this battery in a community with over 2,900 homes to be built over a 15-year period. They're about 6 years into it, and they've been building like crazy. I was just out there a couple months ago, and the community is just beautiful. As I said, customers are seeing substantially lower utility bills programmed to that time of use rate plan. And of course, we're always in talks with APS around what that evolution might look like, since they have megawatts and megawatts of batteries sitting there doing this relatively simple time of use daily cycling, but are capable of more. So perhaps some more to report on in the future. So we get to where we'll spend the rest of the discussion. Sorry, it was a bit of a road getting there, but it was important to kind of lay the foundation. So we started this work in 2017 at Mandalay Homes. 2018, the builders of this community, Soleil Lofts, it's a company called the Wasatch Group, came to Sonnen and basically said, hey, we've got this community in Utah. We originally conceived this community to be off-grid. And this is legit what they were going to do. It was always going to be an electric community, but they wanted to be 100% off-grid. They were going to disconnect from the grid. And basically about a week into their engineering, they discovered that if they really wanted to do that, that they were going to have to overbuild the solar and the electrical infrastructure to the point that it made no financial sense whatsoever. And they were being advised that they probably needed a big gas generator somewhere over the hill behind the community just in case. And at that point, the owner of Wasatch Group basically said, this is ridiculous. I mean, that's not the way to go. We know this isn't the way to go. Our goal is to be a clean energy community, but defecting from the grid, disconnecting from the grid, not having this in conjunction with our utility, Rocky Mountain Power, doesn't seem right. So they partnered with Rocky Mountain Power instead and said, okay, instead of being an off-grid community, we'd like to be connected to the grid. What is it that you'd like for us to build, Rocky Mountain Power, that would be an asset to the grid? How do I take this community I'm committed to being high efficiency, all electric, solar powered, batteries in every unit, connected to the grid in such a way that it provides benefit to the broader Rocky Mountain Power grid and our neighbors around us? And that kicked off basically about a year's worth of discussions between the builder, the developer, the utility, and eventually us, Sonnen. The other thing I would tell you is when this community started, Sonnen was not in the conversation. There was another battery, I won't name them, that was involved in this project because they have a very big name, flew them out to their plant in Palo Alto and wined and dined them and told them we've got the greatest thing ever. And then when they really started digging into it with Rocky Mountain Power, basically utility came back and said, we can't use this thing. If we use this battery the way it's designed and with the limitations that the manufacturer's putting on us, it holds no commercial value to us. So if you want to use it, cool, do it for backup, self-consume, but we're not going to incentivize it. We can't offer you incentives. There's nothing for us to build on. It just isn't the right asset for us. Somehow, then Sonnen got brought into the conversation. Again, I wasn't at Sonnen at the time. I wasn't in the conversations. I was off building houses in Arizona, loving life over there. But Sonnen came into the conversation. And they started talking to Sonnen, talked about our, at the time, with this battery, 15-year, 15,000 cycle warranty, the VPP that already existed in Europe and had been up and running for a couple of years successfully, and how this battery being considered a grid asset class battery and the proven VPP in Europe could be pulled over to the US, and that Soleil Lofts could be built as the flagship lead-off project for what something like this could be at mass scale in the future. So that's basically where we started. These are a real picture, the top one is a real picture of Soleil Lofts today. That is the clubhouse and then buildings around it. Bottom right is just kind of a screenshot of their map just to show you the scale. It's 600 residential apartments across 21 buildings, and then a nice big clubhouse with 2 pools, golf simulators, indoor gym or indoor basketball court, full gym, all that in there. And in total, and of course, a battery in every single apartment. And at the time, because building code allowed it, yes, for real, that is a battery right smack in the middle of the living room. The 1 bedroom and 3 bedrooms, it is in the living room right next to the kitchen. And in the 2-bedroom model, it's in a small laundry room right off the entryway. So these sit in the livable space. Never had an issue with them. Residents don't mind them at all. In fact, some of them have taken to naming their batteries. It's become part of their household. And it's a real shame that building code has kind of moved away from allowing something like this based on other factors. But there's hope that it might come back around. So that's a quick overview of what Soleil Lofts is. 622 residential batteries operating in this community. So 600 of them are in the individual's apartments. There's also 1 battery in each building that runs what they call their communications room. So all their fiber, telephone, and high-speed internet communications, building lighting, things like that, all runs into their communications room. It's backed up with a battery in that space as well. And then there's one building, I think this one over here, building M, that's really big. It has 2 comms rooms, so there's 2 batteries there. And then we also have 4 commercial batteries operating their clubhouse that are tied to, I want to say about 300 kilowatts of solar that are on the rooftop of the clubhouse here. You can see the clubhouse in the picture, not the solar. So commercial batteries here as well. Digging into this a little bit more, these are both renderings, but pretty true to life. There actually is this much solar. What you would hear from Wasatch is that they maybe overestimated the solar production a little bit. I think they put about a half a megawatt more solar in reality than they needed. They actually have a little bit too much solar operating here. So they've shut down a little bit of it in the summer just because they don't want to be pumping so much excess solar into the grid, and then they turn it on in the winter just to kind of optimize that curve. It's just kind of an opportunity they have. And then of course, all harnessed through batteries. So the way this is set up from a practical standpoint is even though you see these large arrays on the rooftops, they are broken out, dropped into SMA string inverters, and then those inverters, I think it's on average about 13 panels, land in the individual units electrical panel downstream of the battery, and then the battery is providing whole home energy optimization as well as backup. So if this community goes offline, essentially the customer is getting whole apartment backup. They can choose to run everything they want to. However, they are trained. They do get alerts through their apartment app if they are off grid, so they can go turn things like air conditioner off, or if they're doing laundry or baking a cake, they can choose to turn off some of those large consumption loads in an effort to conserve that battery. Because the solar is landing downstream of the battery, if the outage happens to occur during sunny hours, they do get to continue to consume that solar in a nanogrid islanded situation as well. So in theory, they could have perpetual backup as long as the sun comes out the next day, and they conserve energy during the nighttime hours. Again, that is on an individual apartment level. So well, I'll say it this way. One of the value propositions that they tell renters that are looking at this community versus one perhaps across the street is, for very similar rent and really cool amenities, you're choosing to live in a clean energy-based community. We're 100% electric or derived from solar on your rooftop. We've got this cool battery. You are part of energy transition, part of the future. Your home comes with built-in backup. So while your neighbors living in apartments, their power goes out, it sucks, what do? Let's go somewhere else and see if the bar down the street has power, or maybe the movie theater or whatever. These residents can choose to stay in their home, continue to watch Netflix or whatever it is in their home while that outage occurs, and make good choices while they shelter in place. If it's a storm, they now have the option to make choices. Are we safe to leave and go somewhere else? Or would we be better off sheltering in place, knowing that our heat works and that we can, run minimal lighting and whatnot, and we can, weather the storm, if you will. And then of course they're receiving partial benefit of lower utility bills. So Wasatch does allow these residents to participate in lower utility bills by way of a lower consumption rate. Obviously, they're not getting all the benefits of the solar because they didn't invest in it. It was Wasatch that spent $20 million building this community, not the tenants. But the tenants do get markedly lower utility bills from Wasatch as a result of being in this community. So some really interesting value propositions that hit both the kind of features and benefits for the property owner, as well as attracting tenants when you need to do such a thing. So some quick stats about the community: 4.5 megawatts of instantly dispatchable capacity, 12.6 megawatt hours of energy reservoir. We are harnessing just over 6 megawatts of solar. So the 4.5 megawatts is a limitation of the inverter in my battery. 12.6 is the sum of all those batteries in there, and there's about 5.5 megawatts of solar that's installed in this community that's being optimized. One of the interesting things about Soleil Lofts, not saying it's because of the battery, but you can infer what you want to infer. It is 100% occupancy. They have had no issues with tenancy in the apartment since they opened in 2019. It was 2019. And a lot of tenants that have stayed long-term. And according to Wasatch, their words, not mine, a lot of tenants really love that it's a great apartment, that it has these clean energy features, that they're seeing a lower utility bill, and then of course that it has that resiliency in the chance that the grid was to go down. Also cool things about this community, at present, it is 100%, and if we have time, I'll show it to you. It is 100% daily dispatched by Rocky Mountain Power for a number of grid services, the least of which being daily cycling for load compensation. For a community like this, for the amount of power that's available in a singular place behind a singular substation, just offsetting load is pretty vanilla to them. They really use this a lot for other really cool things like voltage regulation, frequency regulation, net injection into the grid. They actually do sell some capacity on the broader market. And well, I'll wait till I get to that slide, something we're really proud of. The community did win Utility Dive's Utility Project of the Year in 2020 for what it is and what it does in conjunction with the utility as the operator and stakeholder in its operation. Kind of digging into the stats just a little bit more. This is actually a screenshot from our web VPP interface for Soleil Lofts specifically. So this is real data, not live, but real data. And this is really just an interface that Rocky Mountain Power uses on a daily basis just to understand what's going on and manage the batteries. You can see actually at the time I took the screenshot, 524 batteries were active of the 622, remember? We actually were doing some experimenting. One of the buildings had one of the buildings turned off and a bunch of the batteries were off at the time, but just a quick screenshot of that. Going into, oops, I clicked the wrong button. Going into what it does a little bit more. This is and I apologize if the chart's a little bit small on your screens. Hopefully you guys can blow it up on your side. This is a quick graphical chart of kind of a day in the life of, if you will, and some of the things that we do. This is actually four different things that the batteries are doing at Rocky Mountain Power's direction in a given day. So if we start at, I'll kind of do this backwards. If we start at the beginning of the day, which is right around in here, in the middle of the night, because we had battery capacity, what Rocky Mountain Power did, just kind of as a little bit of an experiment, but just kind of a little bit of a decongestion, because there are other communities on this same substation, is they basically asked for a low power discharge from all the batteries at Soleil Lofts that would go all night long. So what they're basically saying is, you may or may not have load, we don't care. We just want every inverter to push out 400 watts, 500 watts, whatever it might be. Just push out a little bit of power. If you're covering load, partially covering load, or doing a little bit of net injection, and it's cool. It's actually good for us because we're offsetting some other load that happens to be on this feeder that helps us with a little bit of congestion overnight. Then of course in the morning, as soon as the sun comes up, what you're basically seeing here with this yellow line is the sun comes up. This happened to be a cloudy day, so it's a little more exciting. That's why I grabbed it. It was a cloudy day, clouds cleared, so we're really charging well. Clouds came in, we weren't charging so well. And then you got the spike, boom, this big blue spike. What this is a frequency event. A frequency event happened on the grid. Frequency is grid-wide, it's not localized necessarily. A frequency event happens somewhere on the Rocky Mountain Power grid. Our VPP is directly tied into their ADMS. It's called Monarch, OSI Monarch system, their automatic grid management system. And it triggers our system, it triggers our batteries. So anytime there's a frequency event, regardless of what the batteries are doing, if there's a frequency event on the grid, it triggers us. All of our batteries will go from whatever they're doing to discharge immediately. They will do a full power discharge for a duration of 5 minutes. So it's a high power, low energy power product, where what we're basically doing is we're pushing out product to try and lift the frequency of the grid back up, help Rocky Mountain Power stabilize frequency on the grid. If we get to that set point early, it'll cut out early, but we basically run for 5 minutes. The interesting thing about frequency is it's completely random. It's extremely difficult to predict, if predictable at all. Some days you won't have, or some weeks you won't have any for a week. We've actually had days in the spring, last spring, where they had as many as 5 frequency events in one day. and the batteries respond to every single one of them. So frequency events are a really cool one. The reason you see a big spike and not as much of a response is a function of our VPP. What we do is on purpose, we actually ask for a set point response that is greater than that cluster of batteries is possibly able of achieving. And what that does, it tells the VPP, tell every battery to give me everything you've got. If we ever asked for, well, I'll tell you when we go into this other side. So then looking at the other side of this, looking at the evening, we're looking at a couple of demand response products here. So basically what Rocky Mountain Power said was, hey, we'd like for you to do load compensation. We'd like for you to do load compensation from 7 to 8 and then from 9 to 10. Those are some peak hours. If you could just cover your load, not show up on the grid, that's helpful for decongestion. But from 8 to 9, we've got abnormal congestion. So instead what we'd like for you to do is we'd like for you to not only cover load, but give us full power and let's get some net injection out of you. We'd actually benefit from these batteries pumping into the grid, providing some additional energy and power when we need it the most, because these homes are consuming a lot, and it helps us not have to bring as many other assets online. So we're able to program all this. We're doing load compensation, then we go full power for an hour, then we go back to load compensation. Then we just did this low power set point event all night long, charged, responded to a frequency event. All the while we're monitoring the battery SOC, making sure we have plenty of battery SOC to be able to do all these things, and then re-optimizing this throughout the year. So this is the schedule that was happening at the time. We're doing some things a little bit differently right now, just because Salt Lake City's getting slammed with weather, not producing quite as much solar. We're actually doing a little bit of grid charging with them, soaking up some midnight wind that they happen to have in the grid, and then providing those resources during peak the next day. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see bullet points of what I was just describing. It's probably more efficient than the way I described it, but it is what it is. And then just kind of wrapping up the technology piece of it here. Also the commercial batteries. This is another project that we did with Wasatch Group. The picture of the batteries was prettier than the implementation at Soleil Lofts, so we use this picture instead of that one. But the commercial batteries, essentially same thing, just a larger inverter, larger reservoir. You can manage them a little bit different. We can do some different things with commercial batteries, like peak shaving, in addition to shaping load and doing demand response type events, those things like that. And like I mentioned, that then blossomed into what has become the larger WattSmart virtual power plant. This is their larger system, the advertised system or incentive program that is incentivized with Rocky Mountain Power. So today, if you live in Rocky Mountain Power territory, have solar or want to add solar with a battery, they have a really nice incentive for it that encourages the addition of battery to solar and brings more of these assets online. But taking it back to Soleil Lofts, where this all started, I want to make sure I stay focused there. I just wanted to plug the WattSmart program to talk about where it kind of grows into. The other kind of interesting aspect, there we go, that's the slide I wanted for you guys. The other interesting aspect of what Soleil Lofts is, which I know is maybe of interest of this audience as well, so I'll just spend a couple moments on it, is the building science around how the built environment actually exists at Soleil Lofts as well. So new construction is great because of all the things that we can do with new construction. We can really start to talk about insulation levels. We can model these things really well. We can talk about windows and doors with better SHGC, U values, better air sealing, technologies like aero barrier, zip wall, where we can take the seams, get better air sealing, better resiliency. Most of those things were done here. So in making this an all-electric community, the Wasatch Group also took additional measures to get air sealing. All these units are sub 1 ACH 50 on blower door test. They were all validated at the end of construction to make sure they do that. Creates a better environment. They're all operating with ERVs. They have high efficiency air source heat pump for heating and cooling, electric cooking, so that you maintain that better air quality inside. Resilient practices. I don't recall if they use zip wall here, but certainly full shear, being that these are 3- and 4-story buildings. Better doors and windows, and that's fantastic. What happens in that case, which I think is a really interesting nexus, is when you're able to marry better build practices, a better modeled structure, and maybe even equate that to a better HERS rating. What it allows you to do is to better optimize the solar and the battery that goes into these units, or that goes into the home, that goes into the business, where you are potentially spending as much as 20 or 30% less on assets like that because you first optimized the building. Now, I say all that because we also have a big problem in the US no, I shouldn't say problem. We also have a big challenge in the US to deal with, which is the existing stock, right? There are tens of millions of homes and buildings and structures out there that were built 100 years ago, 20 years ago. Even a 20-year-old home could be pretty terrible when it comes to air sealing or window and door quality or insulation levels, things like this, or the appliances or fixtures running within them. Absolutely adding solar and battery to the existing built stock and built environment, very important, very feasible. We are actually doing this with Wasatch in some communities they own in Central California, apartment communities built in the late 80s, early 90s, that are definitely not built to the standard. And it works just fine. The challenge that we start to run into, and where my team and my group really come in when we're working with our partners, is to figure out how we get enough solar on these rooftops, what that battery sizing is, how we work with existing electrical topology, existing metering, perhaps smaller electric panels, 100 amp, 125 amp panels in older apartment communities where traditionally there was a mix of gas and electricity, how to maybe do some really no nonsense EE upgrades in the process. Are you already looking at changing out, single pane aluminum windows for something else? We can help with that. Partnering with some air sealing, certainly getting rid of incandescent light bulbs and fluorescent light bulbs that still exist. So really just kind of looking at Soleil Lofts as a blueprint for a way that you could go about a new build community, incorporating all the latest, greatest technologies to make it a lower consuming asset on the grid first, and then to add solar or wind or not. I think one of the other interesting things is to maybe look at those areas where we do have an overpenetration of solar, like California and Arizona, where the utility basically could partner and incentivize you to say, we'd really prefer if you just had a battery, and goodness, it'd be great if we could charge you during the day when we have this excess load in the grid, and then ask you to discharge against load in the evening. That's a heck of an idea. And then if things start to change and you could go back and you could add solar later, that's a really flexible model that actually pencils really well in California, is beginning to pencil in Arizona, pencils extremely well in Hawaii. Kind of the battery only, and then certainly the opportunities with an AC coupled battery like the sonnen battery to go back and add battery to existing solar arrays that are landed in the panel AC already. So those are the major points that I wanted to cover with you guys in terms of kind of talking case study style about what a battery can do, what the virtual power plant can do, and a real world application where it exists in high density aggregate, is fully controlled by the utility in partnership with the developer and property manager, operating today, and has blossomed into a wider program that individual consumers can participate in with an incentive program that really makes a lot of sense. So with that, Peter, I think I will end the formal presentation and see if any questions came through, or if there's anything we want to answer, or any threads that we might want to pull on. So.
Okay, sounds great. Well, Geoff, appreciate the great presentation. We do have several questions, so let's dive into them.
Cool.
I'd like to know if Sonnen is working with any EV manufacturers to integrate their controls, power management, and expertise to use the car battery instead of a Sonnen battery, or potentially in conjunction with, so V2G.
Great question. Yes, the answer is yes. We're a little more advanced with this in Europe than we are here in the US at this point. In Europe, we actually have a charger integrated with our systems at a residential scale. We're not doing vehicle to home or vehicle to grid with those right now, but instead what we're doing is we actually can manage the EV charger to do solar optimized charging. And we can actually monetize EV charging in the frequency market if a frequency event happens, we can actually modulate down real-time charging of EVs, because that's a relatively high kW load when you're looking at level 2 chargers, and actually modulate that down where we can participate in frequency events. Here in the US, we are proudly a member of a group. If you're not aware of this group, do a little research, it's pretty cool. The group is called VP3. It's managed by one of your guys' neighbors, the RMI group, out of, where are they? They're near Aspen. Carbondale?
Carbondale. No.
Yeah, Carbondale. VP3 was originally formed by GM, Ford, and Google. So you probably heard of all three of those. With that being one of the goals in mind, to really understand, to recognize that there's a very large, disorganized, deaggregated electrification ecosystem out there. And we as manufacturers and vendors of electrification products need to come together. We need to understand how we interoperate with each other, how we coexist and support each other, and provide for a more stable grid. So personal perspective, Geoff Ferrell's personal perspective, I don't necessarily see that a car replaces stationary energy storage for normal daily cycling. A car battery has a completely different purpose than a stationary battery. Certainly if you hammered a car battery the way you could hammer a sonnen battery, you would certainly void any modern warranty today. You know, even some of the things that we're seeing from Volvo and the F-150, you know, Lightning and the cool things that you can do with that, it's really meant for emergency backup. And I think that's where a car is going to be magnificent. And we absolutely want to integrate and have visibility and coexist with EVs that are parked in the garage, is in those situations where you do have prolonged outage that you maybe need more than the stationary system can give you, especially if you're in areas like the mountains of Colorado and maybe get 4 feet of snow and your solar just isn't going to produce for a few days. It's a really smart idea. At the same time, it would sure be nice if you had options that you could pull on, because at some point as an EV owner, you may say, hey, we need to leave. And if your car is hooked up to your house and you've drained that battery down because you've been powering your house for 2 days before you made the decision to leave, if that car battery's dead, we're kind of in a bad spot. So I really see a future where it's going to be an orchestration of both. I think stationary energy storage with purpose-built technology and electrochemistry will be kind of the hub of orchestrating all this, and then certainly low hanging fruit in terms of operating the EV charger to optimize the way we charge our cars on a normal basis, and then being able to use that vehicle to home for edge cases and extreme cases where protecting life and safety long term is a priority. Great question.
Okay. Okay. Though limited for now, Tesla's new LFP batteries can charge to 100%. That's great, but not imperative. Do you see a chance for your VPPs to quote unquote compete to draw, say, 20% from LFP EVs? Would it be more to absorb the excess during the belly of the duck and or other grid reasons?
Yeah, that's definitely where I see it. I really think that, you know, if we're in a scenario where you're primarily charging your car at home, being able to shift some of that load to times other than are inherently kind of convenient for us as EV chargers, you know, some middle of the night or whatever. You know, if you were home, you know, in work from home environment, my EV is actually charging right now. I should go unplug it, but I didn't. If we work from home, being able to get a signal from either a market or from the utility to say, hey, there is excess in the grid. Perhaps it's a price signal for the next 2 hours. We can provide you free energy because we have this excess, and because if we don't give it to you, we just have to curtail it. We're going to lose money anyways. We'd rather do good with it. And for some device, whether that's the battery or some other orchestration device in the home, to be able to say, what are my sinks? Can I go heat the water heater? That's brilliant. I love that. Can I charge my stationary battery? Is there an EV or EVs plugged in right now that need to be charged? And to be able to make those choices to provide smarter sinks for excess energy, I think that's right around the corner. I think that's definitely our next evolution with smart EV charging.
Okay, great. Can you give us an estimate for the installed cost for battery systems, dollar per kilowatt or dollar per kilowatt hour in Northern Colorado, right now?
Right now, right now it'd be expensive because solar contractors are probably home having dinner. Getting them off the table would be expensive. No, I joke. Yeah, I think it's come down. That's a tough one. I've seen models where they both price it by kilowatt hour and by kilowatt. I think the kilowatt is probably the more accepted model, only because they can kind of keep it level with solar, the way we traditionally buy solar. I think right now, you know, for example, a Sonnen Core Plus 10, our 10 kilowatt hour system, is installing for about $4.50 to $6 a kilowatt. So that's system fully installed, you know, any electrical upgrades, you know, balance the system. And then the Sonnen Core Plus 20, so 20 kilowatt hours, double the reservoir, but everything else the same. Probably maybe $1 a kilowatt hour more. You really save a lot in terms of cost per watt when you start looking at larger reservoir compared to, you know, just adding more power or adding more systems. And some systems are different. I think that's the tough part for us as an energy is, or sorry, for an industry, is that Sonnen, for example, we are an all-in-one system. So the system that you see on the screen there is the inverter sits up top behind that screen, and then the batteries all sit down below. It's gotten a little more efficient in some of our newer systems, but we're an all-in-one system, and you can add more batteries to that, you know, all-in-one cabinet, or you can start stacking cabinets. There's some other systems out there where the block is everything. It's power and reservoir. So adding blocks is a little bit more expensive in that regard. So we just looked at it as we want to be flexible in both ways. If you want to add power and reservoir, we can do that. We can stack, which is great. If you just want to add more reservoir, so you can have, you know, a 4-hour battery versus a 2-hour battery for, you know, for argument's sake, that can be done in a much more cost-effective price per kilowatt hour.
Okay. All right, here we go. Referencing a Colorado Public Utility Commission case, which I'm not sure you're familiar with. If you are, it's 23M0466EG, says that competition can be by prosumers at the retail level on Xcel's distribution system, a radical departure from the legacy regulatory compact. The case projects 50 megawatt aggregated by third-party VPP aggregators by the end of the year with compensation, the full dynamic DER value stack, including power, capacity, grid services. It mandates that prosumers see an ROI to cause more DER deployment. Will sonnen be one of the VPP aggregators in Denver? What revenue can prosumers expect for power, capacity, and grid services? So, are you bringing this here for what we have currently mapped out from the PUC?
Yeah. 100% yes. So yeah, so I was kind of joking when I said yes, of course I know that. It turns out I do. This is one that we're actually following very closely. I think it's a fantastic ruling. Interestingly, I think Xcel was actually really excited by this as well, which maybe is an argument, but I think they were. It gave them a little bit, because part of this is also a little bit of a legislative sandbox that they have some room to work in, where they're not necessarily penalized for making bad choices. They're allowed to make some bad choices and not just get, you know, screamed at and smacked over the head by regulators. So I think that's a good thing. Yes, we absolutely are in talks with Xcel. My understanding is the primary DERMS that's been accepted at this point is as Energy Hub, to kind of be that aggregator of aggregators. We do have some relationships with them in the Northeast and some things that we're doing with connected solutions. It's just a little bit early, but 100% yes, we believe that sonnen batteries would perform really, really well in Colorado, even at high altitudes. We've tested that because it was important to me. So yeah, I'd love to see us in the state. Probably later this year. Just need to work out a few things with Energy Hub to understand what that monetization is, because that's the other part that's a little bit ambiguous in the ruling is shall provide an ROI. What the heck does that mean? And I think if it follows what we're seeing in some other connected solution states or what we're seeing in California, essentially what it does, it puts a little bit of onus on Xcel to get comfortable with the types of things that a behind the meter grid edge asset can do, what they're comfortable compensating for, and really what they can pull in their IRP, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, is if I can plan on it, if I can depend on it, if I know it's dispatchable, I can assign $1 to it. If I can't, that's really tough. So a lot of the work that we're aware of so far has basically been between Energy Hub and Excel to say, if we bring these assets in addition to thermostats and pool pumps and irrigation pumps and water heaters, if we start to bring ESSs, what types of things can we do with those ESSs? Are there limitations from certain ESSs that are accepted into the program around how many times you can hit them? You know, there are some programs where it says, do whatever you want 30 times a year. And again, that's a very limiting factor when you look at it from the utilities perspective, because you don't, then you're in this scarcity kind of mindset. Like, we only get to hit this thing 30 times. When do we want to do it? Don't do it till late in the season, because what if we hit it too early in the season? Then we're like, ah, crap, we have a major event. We can't call those batteries. So I know there's a lot of conversation going on around the effectiveness of batteries. Will they show up? Will customers be given an opt-in or an opt-out on an event-by-event basis? This is a huge debate. Opt-in is really difficult for the utility as well, because they don't know what to plan on. You know, if you don't look at your app, or if you're not home, or if you're wary about opting in, what percentage are you really going to get? It's really akin to kind of what we see long-term out of thermostats, which is not a great efficacy. Whereas an opt-out program is better. When you say, by default, you're in. We will send you an alert, and if you say, by golly, I don't want to be a part of this, I will opt out. Utilities really like that. So I think there's just a couple things going on, from my awareness, sitting on the sidelines, because I will tell you this, it's not the sonnen VPP orchestrating. Tiny tear. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, we would have some great advice for them if it was us, but we're not quite in that conversation yet.
Now, really quickly, that 30 event, is that the BYOB program that I think was in Massachusetts, I think?
There's a few. There's a number of programs like that. There's one on Long Island that's like that. There's one in one of the Carolinas. I can't remember if it's north or south. That's like that. It is mostly the BYOBs where they have a very large menu of batteries, which I think is great. I think competition's great. We definitely believe all boats rise in this kind of scenario, which is why we accept other batteries into our VPP as well. One of the things that we don't accept are limits. So, one of the performance specifications of joining the sonnen VPP is you need to have such and such warranty, and you need to allow me to hit it, 2 cycles a day, as many times as I want throughout the year, because that's what the grid needs. And quite frankly, some battery manufacturers have said nope, and a lot of them are shifting their business models and shifting their warranties and shifting their chemistry to allow it, because they think they see that this is really the direction it's going. Backup batteries are probably a thing of the past. I think we as prosumers, really are starting to demand that these things aren't just sunk costs, that they should be able to do something and make us money the 360 to 363 days of the year that the grid is A-okay, and then also be there for backup on those days when it's not.
Okay, just a little follow-up to that one. Do you see VPPs as a competitor to the utility business model, or partner, or both?
Yeah. Can you see if there's any utilities on the call? No, I don't personally see it as competition. Ultimately, maybe with the exception of Texas, and ultimately this is all regulated at some level, and even in Texas they would disagree, but it's regulated in Texas as well. This is all regulated, so I think ultimately what it is it's really going to depend on the structure. Certainly in Colorado, this is a vertically integrated market. Excel owns a lot of assets. Same thing with Utah. Rocky Mountain Power is a vertically integrated utility. They own generation, transmission, distribution, the customer. They own it all. So I think in those cases, what the utility, just speaking of vertically integrated, the utility sees that this is shifting. They see that customers are going to do this thing, and thanks to FERC 2222, the old quad deuce, they can't say no. Just about every utility does engage in intrastate trading. Therefore, FERC 2222 applies. They do need to meet those rules. Maybe outside of Texas again. So it gives us the mandate to be part of the solution. I think most utilities genuinely want to embrace that. They don't want to say no to solar. They also don't want to get sued when the grid crashes, or when bad things happen, or when customers get really upset because there was a PSPS and they had to shut things down so they wouldn't cause a forest fire. You can't have it both ways, and yet we as consumers want it both ways. So I think more than competition, I think utilities are probably scrambling to be part of the solution. They probably want to own part of that solution. I don't think they ever want to own. I've only come across one utility that thought it was a good idea to own assets in people's homes. I don't think they want to own the asset. I think what they want to do is they definitely want to have a hand on the wheel in the way those assets are steered. And if they can create mutual benefit, which again, I truly believe for the first time in an electrified society, that something like this can create mutual benefit. Solar is great. And the way it was rolled out, net metering is a subsidy. I mean, you can't say it's not, it is. There's no business model on the planet where you buy something for $1, sell it for $1, and expect to stay in business. You just can't. The money has to come from somewhere. So I think as penetration of solar increases in markets and those subsidies do exactly what they're meant to do, an evolution of how that works, which is certainly what we're seeing in California, good, bad, or otherwise, is inevitable. And having solutions to that the utility can embrace, and that the utility can engage their consumer to just say, the relationship is no longer I sell, you buy. It's now bi-directionally transactional. You are truly a prosumer, and I want to engage in that relationship. I definitely see utilities beginning to see it that way. Even in our homes, so we're based in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Our factory is. I'm not. Even Georgia Power, which until recently had a very firm stance around, carbon-based fuels being base generation and intermediate generation, maybe moving towards lower carbon-based fuels. That was really the strategy. And even just in the last year or two, that's made a quantum shift in the way that they think and some of the things that they're going after. So there's hope.
Okay. So are you aware of the state Medicaid shelter-in-place programs buying portable batteries today? And CUCIDE, which I'm not sure what that is helping with a demo. If so, thoughts for whole home backup for shelter-in-place. So I'm assuming for this is homebound people with medical conditions.
So I'm not familiar with that specific program. I'm assuming that CUC is implying it's a Colorado-based, which is super cool. A structure like that exists, I think, with all utilities. I think one of the ones I've engaged with recently was a utility in Northern California where they have a critical medical care rate plan. The purpose of that rate plan is so they can identify customers that have these critical care needs, have oxygen generators or ventilators or whatever. And in the event of a PSPS or an outage, essentially what it does is it puts a regulatory onus on the utility to either restore power within so much time or to help those residents actually leave their homes and get to a medical care facility. One of the ways that they are allowed to go about this from a regulatory standpoint is by providing these batteries. So the portable batteries, totally get it. They actually came to us from a very similar place, which is to say, if we incentivized solar and whole home battery for this particular class of electric customer, could we meet the need? Could we implement a battery in such a way that we really just ran critical things in their homes, not their oven, not their air conditioner per se, but instead plug loads where they're plugging in that oxygen generator, that ventilator, maybe a space heater, something like that. So yeah, I think that is ever present on utilities' minds, ways to help those critical care needs customers cope better or make different decisions or buy them more time, to be able to go and evacuate them and get them to care facilities.
Okay. Any conversations with Black Hills Energy, our other IOU?
No, I'm ashamed to say no. I will have to get my guys on that. They haven't reached out to us, but certainly we should be reaching out to them. So thanks for bringing that up. I will take note of that, and we'll make sure we get out to them.
Are you relying on Energy Hub to link to ADMS? Are you using CAT cable to link all 600 units into an aggregation?
Yeah, start with Energy Hub, where Energy Hub has been chosen as the DERMS platform by the utility in this case. We do have an API connection with them where those signals can happen. Some of those signals are automated. Some of them are, quite frankly, an email that we then go schedule the batteries to do things. Most of what Energy Hub is doing today isn't real time. I think the most sophisticated signal that we're getting from Energy Hub is like a 4-hour signal. I don't think they're engaging in much below that, at least that we're involved in. But we can. So absolutely, again, all boats rise. We want to participate with anybody that's got a great model. If that's something the utilities has adopted, we want to play nice, and we want to make sure that we can bring great high quality assets to those markets. Where the sonnen VPP is involved, yes, our preference is to have a direct connection with the ADMS where we can do direct communications and responses. One of the other cool things, again, I'll brag for a second, one of the really cool things about sonnen battery is from signal send to signal receive to full power reaction from a sonnen battery is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 seconds. So in terms of its commercial value for things like frequency response and these other products that require very fast responses, or something like non-spinning reserves, the quicker you can respond. Sorry, he woke up from his nap and demands attention. The faster you can respond, the more value that has to the utility or to the market, / the more value we can create for the individual consumers that are looking to monetize their batteries in the marketplace. So we can do it either way. We really love those automated controls, especially when you couple that with a battery that can respond extremely quickly. I'm sorry, I think that was a two-parter. What was did I miss a part of it?
Oh,
the puppy distracted me, I'm sure.
Are you using CAT cable to link all the 600 units into an aggregator?
Yep. So because this is a grid, because we do consider this a grid asset, the battery does require a physical CAT connection from the battery back to a router or switch. In the case of Soleil Lofts, one of the amenities of a Soleil Lofts apartment is that they have fiber to every apartment. Part of that comms room is the fiber switch. So in each apartment, they have a switch where fiber comes in. They have a number of ports, including Wi-Fi. We do plug into one of those ports, fiber back to the backbone in the clubhouse, which we also back up, and then fiber out to the internet, which ultimately allows for sonnen VPP to communicate. The VPP is a cloud, it's cloud-to-cloud, cloud-to-device communications topology.
Okay. Is there a planned battery replacement budget and timeline for the project?
Oh, that's fantastic. So in the case of Soleil Lofts, the answer is no. The battery that they have in these apartments, which we still offer today, this is what we call the EcoLinks battery, in this case a 20 kilowatt hour battery. That battery does carry a 15,000 cycle, 15,000 cycle, can we say that back? 15-year, 15,000 cycle warranty with an 82% original state of charge at 15,000 cycles. So in this case, Soleil Lofts did not model a battery replacement in their 20-year performa. So this is built on a 20-year operational schedule with Rocky Mountain Power, and 20 years no. We do have some other projects where we're using the current Sonnen Core Plus or Sonnen Evo, which is a 10-year, 10,000 cycle battery. Again, extremely robust, but because it does only carry a 10,000 cycle warranty, some underwriters do ask them to plan a battery replacement at like year 12, just to be on the safe side. I doubt they'll need to do it. And in 18 years, we'll all high five and be like, I'll buy Geoff an extra beer because I didn't have to spend $6 grand on batteries. we'll see how that goes.
Here's a good one. Do you envision VPPs bidding head-to-head against gas peaker?
100%. We do it today. I do this in California every day, and man, do I love what I get to do. Yeah, we bid right now. We're bidding. It's a relatively small fleet. We're building it up in California. We're bidding close to a 0.5 megawatt in SDG&E territory right now in the CAISO market, and it straight up competes with gas plants, nuke plants, peaker plants. I can kick a peaker plant's butt every day of the week. Some solar fields and wind fields out there in the desert.
Cool. Any plans to submit a bid in response to PRPA's recent all source RFP?
Whoever sent in that question, would you email that over to me?
Actually, I can get it to you. It's out there.
I
think
don't.
somebody put in the chat who knows the, I think it's the April's the due date.
Okay, I think so, but it would sure be nice. I'll get with Stuart, one of my sales engineers. I want to make sure we try to be in every RFP we can possibly manage the workload to be in. So if you guys bring it up, yeah, I'd love to read about it. And,
yeah, or if somebody wants to drop it and the link into the chat too.
Yeah,
but I have it. It's out there.
Cool. Okay.
And it's also on. I can't remember is it BidNet or something? They always put everything out on. There's some aggregator of bids.
Okay, I haven't had time to troll BidNet in a while, so yeah. Appreciate the heads up.
Okay, actually, it looks like that's just got a little everyone thumbs up. Thank you. So unless there's any other questions, I'll kind of start the countdown. But again, yeah, Geoff, we'll get you that. Somebody will get me that link, or I'll get it to you here right after the call.
Okay.
But otherwise, appreciate you having you today. We've had, actually, it was Kevin Bream, I think, with RMI, who I think was a part of the VP3.
Yep.
So he did the high level. So this is really cool to have, just sort of how they really work in action, and especially, you put forth the case study of you've got a vertically integrated IOU that could be really an obstruction, but instead they're embracing this. So I think it's a great story on really how VPPs are going to truly benefit everyone. And when we look at combining this with demand side management, it really makes the path to 100% a lot more feasible and faster. So, okay, well, everyone, I got to make sure that the recording goes out on the thank yous, but if not, you can always email me and I'll send you the link. Geoff, thanks again. We'll let you get back to your 83-cent kilowatt hour.
another 2 hours here, 2 more hours we got to conserve. So
yeah.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciated sharing with you all. Certainly if there's any other follow-up, my contact info will be out there. Happy to answer any questions. And if you guys have projects, we would love to chat about them. Again, all boats rise if we're the right solution. Love to be part of it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone have a great evening.
Thank you.